So hello, my name is Amber Case, and I'm going to talk with you about an anthropology of cyborgs for cyborgs. And usually I have everyone stand up and show their phones and then tell them how cyborg they are. But today we'll start a little bit differently. I don't know how many people have know about this type of, it's like stochastic gradient descent, but what's really important is that sometimes when you're searching for a solution, especially when it's new technology, you might go over to that little indent and say, we found the solution, it's AR, it's VR, because that's what we've been told in a magazine, or that's what we've been told in our social groups. That's the solution, that's where we should be participating. It's this specific shape of AI, it's this way of collaborating with each other. But in reality, if we stop there and we stop exploring, we miss this one over here. Yeah, I have a laser pointer. This over here we miss if we don't walk around and look at what's going on. And the question is, how do we better walk around and look at what's going on? And this is a hard thing. And if you add more dimensions to your search, if you add more dimensions to your context and your metacognition around a space, you might be able to find more than you thought. And I want to go over a couple of different ways that I find is an interesting way of doing this. So, one of my favorite people, Ward Cunningham, I always like to ask him, how do you think the way you do? And he's known for Cunningham's law. The best way to get the right answer on the internet is not to ask a question, it's to post the wrong answer. Now, this is great because one of the ways that you can do that is just go and post something that you know is incorrect, but it might get you closer to what the real thing is. The other thing that I notice about programmers is that very few people look at asking questions, because I think programming is very often about being declarative. You want to tell the computer what to do, exactly what to do. You want to be extremely precise. And when I did so much mathematics, it was about this precision. It was about having these answers. But I noticed that there's a whole group of people who actually can get around this space really, really fast, faster than most people I've seen, and that's artists, because artists add more dimensionality to the space, don't necessarily limit themselves to a specific subject matter, and also they are asking questions. And oftentimes they're looking at the right question to ask. And I love this quote from James Baldwin: "The purpose of art is to lay bare the questions that have been hidden by the answers." And I think a lot of times the answers stand in the way of us asking where something came from and whether we should be going down this path and resting, or if we should consider to keep on exploring and find that global minima instead of the local minima. So one of the questions that I like to ask of anything is, when we throw a term around, where does it come from? How many people know where the term artificial intelligence came from? Yay! And how many people have thought of asking this question? It was very difficult to actually get an answer. There were a few people that talked about this online. And here's the story that I got out, which is Norbert Wiener was talking about cybernetics. And early on, cybernetics was about control systems and feedback loops and keeping humans in the loop. And it was very oriented from a group of people that were very, I don't want to say blue collar, but it was like non-abstract. People who were setting up factories and setting up systems, people who were doing electrical engineering and running simulation models and working with things that they knew were dangerous. The problem with this person is that he talked a lot, and he would go to meetups and he would say, well, that's cybernetics. That's cybernetics. What you're talking about is definitely cybernetics. And it was starting to annoy people. A lot of people really wanted to hang out and not have this person just take up all of the voice in the room. And the term cybernetics is from the Greek, which is about helmsperson. It's someone who's steering a ship. If we think about it, it's not some system automatically doing everything for you. It's about having a bunch of automated systems on a ship or in a car doing things for you, but you're the person steering. The human is getting lots and lots of information, putting that into system type 2 thinking so they can do other things, and they're making decisions based on that. So there's always a person getting the information, making a decision, and how those systems are designed. And if they're designed well, that makes all the difference. So what happened was that McCarthy and others created this term artificial intelligence. He says, one reason for inventing the term AI was to escape association with cybernetics. I wish to avoid having either to accept Norbert Wiener as a guru or having to argue with him. So they got together and they made this conference. They said, hey, Dartmouth, can we have a little summer conference on artificial intelligence? And if you look, there's some massive luminaries here, very playful people that played around with questions. Claude Shannon, most notably, getting asked questions, why is there noise in this signal in telephones? And through figuring out why, ended up creating all sorts of interesting innovations through the interesting questions that were asked at Bell Labs. Here's a little plaque up in 1956 at Dartmouth. And here's everyone so happy that they don't have to have Norbert Wiener in the room, talking all over them. But the problem with this is that the term artificial intelligence, every single piece of text that we have has specific aesthetics associated with it. And the aesthetics of artificial intelligence were different than cybernetics. And they're so exciting to journalists that we started to have two worlds. One world was the fear and the excitement. And the other world was, okay, we're doing automation based on basic principles. Let's see how we can do this well. And let's integrate all of the engineering principles that we've had as a continuum into this system. Well, that is cybernetics. And then here is something that people can post about on LinkedIn and not entirely get right, but look like they're being an expert. And of course, the first chatbot, Eliza, which is the foundation for how we interact with a lot of these chat systems today, came out in 1960 by Joseph Weizenbaum, who was making fun of the idea, 1966, but he was making fun of the idea that, oh yes, you can definitely automate therapy. Let me just make the most stereotypical therapist as an automation, and then found that his secretary loved using this bot, not because it was perfect, but it got her in a cybernetic feedback loop with herself so that she could have a metacognition about how she was experiencing the world. Later on, he thought everyone was confusing these bots for real people, when in reality, no one was. They just found it an interesting tool for metacognition in the same way that you might throw the I Ching, or use tarot cards, or talk with someone through your problems. It's still all cybernetics. And then, of course, there was the takeoff and the crashes and the booms and the busts. But in 1900, when The Wizard of Oz came out, it was all about this fear of automation. The industrial man, does he have a heart? The scarecrow's the farmer, does he have a brain? Can we transition into this new reality? We have Dorothy on the gold standard of the time, walking through, trying to figure out how is she going to grow up in a world that's transitioning from an agrarian society to an automated one, in which we have humans using tools alongside each other, farming, to humans using tools to use other human beings through factories and automation. So when I talk about science fiction versus reality, we have a lot of people who might watch a movie called Minority Report and think that the future will be hands-based interaction systems. If you were to work at the equivalent of the DMV all day with your hands going like this to do information, you would be very exhausted, or you would have mega muscles. When in reality, the best type of interfaces are pass-through interfaces. When Google first came out, people tried to scroll down the page because they thought there was content. But now people use it kind of like a calculator. You focus on the task and not the tool, and the tool dissolves with use, and we pass through. How we design systems is governance, and if we design them in a way in which they are not passed through, and people focus on the tool and not the task, we end up giving people complete headaches all the time and kind of DDoS attacking their attention. We have things that look really, really good in advertising, like this infinite car display mock-up. And we have things that just work, where you can have a conversation with someone else and you don't have to worry about going through a touchscreen to turn on the windshield wipers and having the system update stop you from being able to use your car. One was sold based on how it looks. The other one was evolved based on how it felt to use. So I think we're in this weird trajectory where we're in this local minimum to say that touchscreens and blue lights and all these things should be done, and these specific types of interfaces. But we're not voting on them based on how they feel to use, like a light switch that you don't actually notice unless you need to use it. I feel like in these type of times, there is a danger. Times when telling stories about doing the real thing are more rewarded than actually doing the real thing. And that a lot of people can't tell the difference between a story about someone doing a real thing with someone with charisma and the real thing that's quite hard to do. And this is happening across user experience, artificial intelligence, things like AR and VR, because people aren't asking the questions of where things came from. We've divorced history from it, and we're not being playful around running around the landscape to see if we're stuck in a local minimum. There's this field of cognitive security that I think is really interesting, but I feel like all of us has a responsibility to understand our own local minima and how we adopt an understanding of our world, and whether we should be asking the questions or not about how we should be going about things. And to ask, are we doing this out of fear because everybody told us this is the thing we need to do? Or are we actually asking questions about what we could be doing? So when we talk about humans alongside technology, there's a cybernetic loop, but there's also the idea of, if you look at any tool that works alongside culture, like this machine that helps pound gravel so that people can make absolutely beautiful pottery, and then that set of practices and tools and cultures is handed down from generation to generation, this is basically a calm technology. You can actually see it and hear it and understand it. It's legible to everybody, but it's working alongside a culture at group scale, not just human scale. I can't go too much further. I have so many more slides because we're running late on time and I want to make sure everybody has more time. But I have a lot more stuff online which I can tell you about, and I'll just give you a brief overview if you want to read more. In the 90s, these two researchers, and one of them was Mark Weiser, talked about the idea that technology would one day be very cheap. And at that point, the most scarce resource in the world wouldn't be tech. It would be our attention. And how technology worked with or against our attention would make or break the future of technology. And I think that's one of the biggest things if we think about a cognitive security perspective. The way that we build our tools, we're not taking attention into account. We're making things that look a certain way, but we don't understand if you're doing anything from governance to voting to signing up for an event, sitting down, choosing something. It's not necessarily that something should be easy to use the first time, but it should be easy to use once you get used to it. It takes a long time to learn how to drive a car or to ride a bike. But once we're used to it, we never have to learn it again. Think about some sort of CRM that changes every week. And if you go away from it for a couple of months, you have to relearn it again. All of the things that you want to do with it, you're prevented from doing. So I've started this thing called the Calm Tech Institute, where it's a series of guidelines to actually rank quantitatively how much attention something takes to use, how much attention something takes to support, and has a bunch of principles that bring back original engineering that we have kind of lost, and original design principles that are more rooted in the past. Ideally, at least 1,200 years of history is trying to go into this, where it's a continuum, so that we can build tools and rate them in a way that actually makes sense to us at human scale. Because I think this continuum isn't there anymore. We think of technology over here, and we think of tools here, and it's actually part of the same system. And I think when we're doing automated systems and AI and mechanical engineering, as long as we're doing the analog first, then our minds are in a good shape to do the next steps. But if we stop teaching ourselves these things, then we lose out, and we end up in the abstract science fiction space that ends up making beautiful things that are very difficult to use. Thank you so much.